Hello, thank you for joining Toxic to Triumph. My name is Matthew Pfeiffer. I am your host, and I have on a very special guest, a longtime friend. I have on Dr. Andrew Blackwood, and he will be absolutely upset if I actually call him doctor. So he goes by Coach Drew. And Coach Drew, thank you very much for joining us. And he is not only a psychologist, but he's also a coach, and he specializes in teaching people about genuine apologies. And the reason why I decided to have him on today is that apologies are a large part of toxic relationships and healthy relationships for that matter. Not everyone who listens to this is in a toxic relationship. And it is important for people to understand what is a genuine apology. How do I know if I'm receiving a genuine apology, and how do I know if I'm actually giving a genuine apology? Because apologies are a very important part of relationships. So, I'm sorry, Coach Drew, thank you for
That's
joining me.
all right.
And if you want to tell us a little bit about you and tell us where you're at, and we can get started.
For sure, for sure. By way of correction, I'm a psychotherapist, not psychologist, and a lot of people don't know the difference. But uh, yeah, we can get into that another time. But yeah, I work with people. I love working people with people. For me, it's all about learning, healing, and growing, and I'm built for it. Been doing it for over 15 years, and I learn something new every single day. So it feels good to be in the right spot, doing the right things, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're in you. I know you're in Canada, but tell if you want to tell the audience what part of Canada you're in and how they can find you.
Yeah, I recently moved from the GTA over to St. Catherine, so I'm a little bit closer to the border, Niagara Falls there. Yeah, I'm online. I do virtual work with people. You can always find me at coachdrew.ca, or you can reach me at info@coachdrew.ca.
I didn't know you were closer to Niagara Falls. Now when I go travel to Buffalo, I can. We're gonna have to link up now.
Yes, for
Oh,
sure. I'm just right across the border, so.
all right, perfect. Well, tell us about. I mean, what is an apology anyway? I mean, I think that some people take an apology for granted. We talk about it so much. We grow up, and with siblings, you have siblings that fight, and the first thing that parents want to do is tell them, have you tell your sibling I'm sorry. But
Right.
is that a genuine apology? What is that what is an apology, and what are we learning as children about apologies? Let's start there.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good place to start because that's pretty much the extent that we are literally taught about apologies. And I call that the coerced apology, right? When you're
Mhm.
forced, go kiss, make up, right? Say sorry. They didn't even hear the full story. They didn't ask questions, right? Whether or not you
Mhm.
are sincere or not, you are supposed to apologize. And the intention, I would say, is probably good,
Mhm.
right? Um, but good intentions are not good enough,
Mhm.
right? Good intentions without good information and consistent application and support, like that's a formula for health. But parents, we stop at that. I'm teaching them the right thing to do,
Mhm.
the right thing. And that puts people in a position to not look at themselves to say, okay, am I actually sorry?
Right.
Right? There is no empathy involved in that.
Wow.
If you want to teach something, you want to teach people how they want to be,
Mhm.
right? So I see it. I have two girls. One's gonna be 8 in a few days, and the other is 4. So when they get into it, as kids do, and one is hurt, then I ask the other one, okay, so did you intend to do that? And if it was an accident, then that's one thing. If it was not, it's another. But anyhow, but that's just first gathering information. Then
Right.
then you move on to the next part. Okay, did you want to hurt your sister? Well, how do you feel that your sister is hurt? Right?
Right.
So what can you do to address that pain? Right? And then they kind of walk into it. And sometimes they're not ready.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, okay, well, if you don't want to apologize, you're not ready to apologize, where are you gonna go? What are you gonna do? Because it's not it's not fair to be in the same space with this person that
Yeah.
you just hurt and you don't want to address the pain,
Right.
right? So I don't force them to do it. I invite them, I encourage them, and that's one of the things that we have the opportunity to do for our kids, right? We want to
Hmm.
show them that this is something that is healthy, this is something that is good, this is
Hmm.
something that you can choose, not
Hmm.
something that you have to do.
Hmm. And what do you do when it is intentional? Someone, your child is, I was ticked, and so yeah, I hit her, I hit him, and I'm still angry, and what happened? What does it look like for a child? If because I do get a lot of questions about children when they start to when you are starting to see kind of a lack of empathy. Is that
Mm.
teachable?
Yes, I definitely believe it is teachable, and it is important to know your children well. So, on the one hand, you know your child, but on the other hand, you get to shape and cultivate that child, right? So, it's important to see the strengths and the good qualities of the child and speak to their identity, right? So, when I address my child, I know that she's loving, I know that she's caring. Nobody is kind all the time,
Right.
but I reinforce that good. I say, you know what? You're a kind person, okay?
Right.
You're a
That's
kind
good.
person. It makes sense to be that way with your sister, right?
Hmm.
So even if they do acknowledge, yeah, I was angry and I hit her. Okay, well, is that the best thing to do? Do you have any other options? What do you think is going to happen if you keep hitting people,
Hmm.
right? So you explore the long-term consequences with the child. You walk them through that because their brains aren't developed,
Right.
right? They haven't thought through all of this. They haven't had the life experience that we have. But
Right.
yet sometimes we expect them to
Right.
know better. We expect them to do better consistently. That's just not real life,
No.
right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So what do we do when it's adults and we are starting to see or we're starting to question whether or not someone's apology is very genuine. We're starting to see. First of all, let me just stop there and let me just ask, how do we know when someone's actually giving us a genuine apology?
Okay, good questions. Well, to back up for a moment, um, when I talked about speaking to the character of the child, right?
Hmm.
What we're doing is we are fostering healthy sense of self,
Hmm.
self-esteem. And most of the time, I would say 99% of the time that I meet with people, they do not have a healthy sense of self.
Hmm.
That doesn't start in your adult life.
Right.
This is as a result of not having the healthy things poured into you. A healthy
Right.
sense of self is based on an accurate self concept, right? And we could get into that another time. But so to fast forward now, a lot of people don't have that. And it
Hmm.
impacts both the hurt person and the hurting person,
Hmm.
right? A lot of times we put up with stuff because our level of self esteem isn't what it ought to be,
Right.
isn't what it could be. And a lot of times people are hurting other people because, again, they don't know how to do life well with themselves or with other people.
Right.
So, as opposed to looking at the intentions of the person, right? How do you know when an apology is good? I talk about that in the book, The Art of a Genuine Apology.
Hmm.
Let's talk about the apology in and of itself.
Hmm.
For starters, there are different levels to apologies. There's level one, which is just the common, the basic apology.
Yeah.
This is applicable when there's no real significant hurt. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably 1 to 3. You
Hmm.
bump into somebody, say, oh, my bad, I'm sorry, and you move on with your life.
Hmm.
Then you move to the next level. If there's a degree of hurt from 4 to 6,
Hmm.
that's when you need a meaningful apology, apology full of meaning.
Yeah.
Again, it could be short, it could be quick, it could be, not a lot of conversation needed necessarily.
Hmm.
But when it comes to significant hurt and a significant relationship, those two first kinds of apologies will not cut it.
Hmm.
What you need is the art of a genuine apology. Now, a
Right.
genuine apology, um, it has 5 values woven into it. Okay.
Hmm.
Value number one, humility.
Hmm.
Okay. Number two, vulnerability.
Hmm.
Number three, empathy. Number four, responsibility. And number five, accountability.
Hmm.
If your apology is missing any one of these values, it's not going to cut it. It
Hmm.
just isn't.
Okay.
So, um, as we walk through the steps, and I'll give you the steps, then I'll kind of highlight as well the values and how they're woven in.
Right.
So, a genuine apology that addresses significant hurt, number one, it it's going to follow a formula. Okay, it's I call it live. So your
Hmm.
apology lives on long after it's been offered.
Hmm.
Okay, so L, you want to label the specific behavior that you're apologizing for.
Hmm.
There's no room for ambiguity here. You want to be clear.
Right.
When I said this to you, okay, in front of your parents, okay, these words, right, you're very clear,
Hmm.
right? If an apology is not clear, I wouldn't say that they're not sincere,
Hmm.
but they don't have the understanding of how to offer this apology,
Right.
okay? So number two, um, I. You want to imagine the impact. Oh, let me backtrack. L. The values.
Hmm.
Humility. It takes
Hmm.
humility to
Yeah.
actually acknowledge it, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to be vulnerable, but you're
Hmm.
also taking responsibility.
Yeah.
When I did this, when I said this. If they start their apology by saying, "When you do this," they're off to a bad start.
Mm.
Okay, or
Yeah.
if that
That's big.
follows,
Hmm.
right, if it follows what they said, when I hit you yesterday, it's because you,
Hmm.
right,
Yep.
or I came home late, but that's another thing,
You
right?
pushed me
You
to
know,
it.
right, you don't want
Hmm.
any of that stuff. A genuine apology is going to take full responsibility,
Yeah.
okay,
And
for their
people,
action.
I think people listening are really appreciating this because, as you know, that's one of the big, big, major tactics that you see in toxic relationships is an apology that involves you, right?
Right,
Just what I wouldn't have, I'm sorry for cheating, but if you wouldn't have done blah, 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 I'm
right,
sorry for
right,
hitting you, but you pushed me to blah, 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 blah.
right,
And
right.
so, which becomes a major part of the gaslighting.
Yeah, for sure. And here's what's interesting about that, Matt. Um, I think I have a good understanding because not everybody is intentionally manipulative.
Hmm.
Okay.
Right.
Most of the people in this world have gone through so much hurt and they have not had it addressed.
Right.
Like a lot of people are like, why do you need a book to tell somebody how to apologize?
Right.
And I'm saying, well, you obviously don't know what it's about. That's why you're
Right.
questioning whether or not a book is required.
Exactly.
Because if I have never seen it done well,
Hmm.
why would you expect me to know how to do it well?
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Hmm.
So there's often a cycle of events, a sequence of events
Hmm.
where there's hurt and there's hurt and there's hurt and there's hurt. So
Hmm.
the truth is, there is possibly interactions that have happened that have hurt the person who's hurting, whether
Hmm.
it was somebody in their childhood or whether it was the person they're in a relationship now.
Hmm.
That aside, that explanation has no place in a genuine apology.
Right.
It has a place in your story, it has a place in your healing.
Hmm.
That's when you talk to a therapist, a coach, or somebody else who's trusted.
Hmm.
That's who you talk that through with first.
Yeah.
But when you're offering an apology, it's not time to explain.
Hmm.
It's not, I call it an apology add on. It's not even the time to kind of put all of this weight about how bad you feel,
Yeah.
right? I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. You must think I'm the scum. I don't deserve you.
Right.
Yeah, it may be true,
Hmm.
but don't put that in the apology because then the person you're apologizing to either feels guilty or they feel angry or they feel unsure, right?
Because then at
So
that point, you're making it about you instead of you actually trying to heal them, it sounds like.
exactly,
Hmm.
100%, because that is the point of a genuine apology. It is to address their hurt. It is to foster their healing. You will take care of your healing elsewhere,
Right.
and you are healed in the process,
Hmm.
but the focus is for them at that moment.
Right.
So you see those values in the L.
Hmm.
Numbers, the second step, I. You want to imagine the impact that
Hmm.
your actions had on that person.
Hmm.
And this is what brings in the empathy,
Hmm.
right? When I did this, I think it impacted you this way,
Hmm.
right? I believe you experienced so much hurt, or you were so angry, and again, we want to position it as a theory, okay? Because
Right.
we don't want to tell people what they feel.
Hmm.
I don't want to do that. I imagine it impacted you this way, or if it
Hmm.
was me, this is how I would feel. You
Hmm.
want to exercise that empathy, and here's the beautiful thing about a genuine apology. It's a conversation. Okay,
Hmm.
it's not just a one-way offering. So you get to ask the person, "This is how I imagine impacted you. Am I right about that?"
Hmm.
Right? If somebody isn't able to experience empathy and doesn't have experience practicing empathy, they're not usually going to do this part well.
Hmm.
Remember, good intentions are not good enough,
Right.
right? We in our society, we don't label our emotions. We have
No.
five of them:
Hmm.
happy, mad, glad, sad, right?
Right.
But when somebody can say, you know what, if I were in your shoes, I would feel so dejected.
Hmm.
I would feel humiliated,
Right.
right? I would feel forgotten. I would feel unimportant.
Right.
When we can label those things, or if we can't, we can ask the person, how did it impact you? Because I want to know,
Right.
right? If they're not able to tolerate that, they're not going to be able to go the distance with you.
Right.
They're not going to be able to walk where you can walk because they're just not ready,
Yeah.
right? Which leads us to the third step, which is V. You want to verbalize a commitment to a plan of action.
Hmm.
Okay?
That's
Very
big.
rarely do people ever do this.
Hmm.
Number one, you can't follow through on a plan that you haven't come up with.
Yeah.
Okay? A promise is not a plan.
Right.
I promise it will never happen again. Well, do you know how you got there in the first place?
Right. Right. Yeah, that's
If
huge.
if you don't
Yeah.
know how you got there in the first place, then you're probably going to end up there again. Not
Right.
because that's what you intend to do,
And
but that
I think that's huge because the person who's receiving this has to understand that if this person is giving a genuine apology, that it's a process for them to do their own healing too. That it's not
that's right.
just a promise that it's not going to happen again, but if they're going to take a level of accountability, right, with actionable steps, that it's a
Right.
process that,
That's
you know,
right.
if they are getting if they do get a therapist or a coach or an accountability partner, or it's going to be a process for them to begin to unwind some of that conditioning and some of the behaviors that may have shown up to begin with.
That's right. That's right. The way I see it and the way I say it is that the the journey to healing begins with understanding.
Hmm.
And if you don't understand how you got somewhere, if you don't understand how you were feeling right when you did it or leading up to doing something, what's going to happen when you feel that way again or when you're in
Right.
that situation,
Yeah.
right? So, a plan of action that you can commit to, it involves several steps, and I go into that in the book as well. But obviously, you can see that it involves accountability,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And responsibility
Hmm.
and humility, right?
Yep.
It involves those three values and vulnerability, right? Because it takes, oh man, it takes a great degree of humility and vulnerability to say, this is not only my responsibility, but I have this thing to work on,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
Everybody knows nobody's perfect, but
Right.
to acknowledge and then to get help,
Hmm.
okay? If the hurt is significant and if it's repetitive, if that
Hmm.
person doesn't get help, then they're not accepting full responsibility for their future behavior.
Hmm. What about the person who says they're going to get help, goes maybe one session, two sessions, or and then like they may even have some actionable steps. They do it for a week or two, and then they're done.
Hmm.
And then not only that, but just throws it in your face, or just, well, I did it, I went, and or the person who goes to therapy, goes to see a coach, and just says, I just, there's something wrong with that therapist. There's something wrong with this person, and you start to notice a pattern that every single person that's holding this person accountable for their apology, for their bad behavior, this same person is saying that there's something wrong with this, with the therapist, with whoever that's holding them actually accountable for their actions.
Right. So I can't speak to the specifics about what could lead that to be.
Hmm.
However, I can appreciate that not a lot of people who are in a supportive and accountable role know what they're doing either,
Right.
right?
Right.
I've worked with people, I'm like their seventh therapist.
Yeah. Hmm.
And when they meet with me, they're like, this is good.
Yeah.
This is different,
Hmm.
right? So they might be having a difficult time with their accountability community,
Hmm.
but they still have the choice to try again,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
So this speaks to the level of commitment, but also how detailed the action plan
Right.
is,
Hmm.
right? So what we're really starting to bridge to, because the art of a genuine apology, it serves as a bridge to reconciliation.
Hmm.
This apology is not a one-way offering, like I said before.
Hmm.
This is a bridge restoring credibility. This is a bridge saying, okay, you can trust me. This is a bridge saying, you know what, we're going to go into the future together,
Right.
and this is how we're going to do it.
Right.
That's what reconciliation is.
Hmm.
Reconciliation isn't like we hashed it out and we're good now. No, reconciliation is how are we going to get from here to there? Where are we going and how are we going to do it together? What is it going to look like? And
Yeah.
that's ongoing. So if somebody says, you know what, I don't like that therapist. Okay, so what you going to do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where are you going to go next?
Right.
You can talk about how will we know that there's been a degree of healing and there's
Hmm.
been a degree of change,
Yeah.
right? So the absence of the behavior is one indicator,
Hmm.
but significant hurt and those behaviors, they're often attached to other things, right?
Yeah.
So when you see those other things, yes, it makes sense to be concerned. Yes, it makes sense to raise it. When you do raise it, you don't want to accuse the person. You don't want to tell them they haven't made any changes.
Right.
You don't want to use all or nothing thinking,
Hmm.
right? There are ways to become a supportive accountability person.
Right.
So I talk about the reality in the book that there's a difference between holding somebody accountable
Hmm.
and having supportive accountability.
Hmm.
Accountability, when it's healthy, is something that somebody wants. They opt in. It's not something that they're held to the fire to do.
Right.
Like that's what
That's
jail
good.
is. Like, that's
Yeah.
policing.
Absolutely.
Right? You
Yeah.
don't want to police your partner or parent your partner,
Right.
right? You want to be like, listen, okay, so what's your plan?
Right.
Right?
Because
So
you policing your partner can actually lead to more bad behavior.
100%, because it
Because.
sets up this
Hmm.
dynamic where you're ultimately responsible, and
Hmm.
it infantilizes the other person, and especially if it's well, I was gonna say especially it's a male, but I don't think anybody likes to be treated like a kid.
Well, I was that's where I was going to go with it. Now, one of the things I talk to people about is that when you treat your partner, your significant other, like you're their parent, we're geared and we're wired to leave our parents. It's almost
Mhm.
inevitable, right? That if you that you we're geared and we're wired to eventually have our own independence. And if you feel like this person is parenting you instead of a part of this supportive community, like you were talking about, that we're partners in this together, right? That they, it's almost. I mean, think about when you're growing up, you have no problem. You rebel against your parents, and we're almost wired to do that to begin to separate and gain our independence. And so you're just going to recycle that same type of behavior.
Yeah, 100%. And that's one of the things that I talk to in my work with couples in the groups. We don't realize that the language that we use, that we've inherited, it conveys a lot of things that we don't intend.
Yeah.
So when we tell people what they need to do, what
Hmm.
they have to do, I call that negative motivation language.
Hmm.
It automatically disempowers them, and it causes people to feel controlled,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And the opposite to that is when you actually use motivational language and you harness motivation,
Yeah.
right? You move from commands to requests.
Yeah.
This is important to me.
Yeah.
Is that important to you? Do you
Yeah.
want that? Do you want
Hmm.
us to have a respectful relationship? Because if you don't, you can just tell me,
Yeah.
right? And I will grieve and I will move on. But
Hmm.
if you want that, what are you going to do?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't want to get too far. I don't want to get too far off. I think we were on. Were we on V or were we on E?
That's right. V,
Yep.
V.
Uh,
So now we get to E.
yep.
Okay. E is where you extend an invitation for feedback on your apology.
Uh-huh. Okay.
As you can imagine, this is where you are most vulnerable,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it demonstrates that there are no strings attached here.
Yep.
I'm not doing it because you're going to offer an apology. I'm not doing it so we could just move on quickly.
Yeah.
I'm doing this because whether you accept my apology or not, I'm here for your healing.
Right. Right.
So, what did you think about my apology? Did I miss anything? Because I
Mm-hmm.
want to get it right,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That's where you open yourself up and you say, okay, talk to me. And again, this is another example of how it's a dialogue. We go
Mm-hmm.
back and forth, back and forth. And notice when we bounce back to the plan of action, the plan of action is ongoing,
Yeah.
right? It's part of your apology, but then it weaves into reconciliation.
Yeah.
So I tell the story about my driving with my wife. I like the
Mm-hmm.
way I drive, but
Yep.
my driving, quite honestly, used to scare my wife. And for a while, she would tell me and I'd dismiss it and I'd
Right.
dismiss it until, we had our first child and she was just like,
Yep.
I'm done.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'm done.
Uh-huh.
So previously, I would apologize and be like, okay, 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 no problem. You just tell me, just remind me, which is not a good plan. Again, I put the responsibility on her, who's afraid for her
Mm-hmm.
life
Yep.
because of my driving, to
Uh-huh.
remind me that I'm not driving in a way that's comfortable for her.
Yeah.
So I learned, okay, Andrew, you get to take this on. I came up with a statement that I would say every time we got into the car,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was verbal, it was concrete, it was repetitive, it was routine.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it wasn't, I would easily forget and go back to my way of driving.
And I
So
think that's
after a
it.
couple
Go ahead.
I was just yeah, after a couple weeks, I didn't need to say it anymore out loud because I
Yeah.
was saying it in here, and then eventually my driving changed.
Yep. I think it's important that what you just mentioned in terms of having a statement, almost like a safety phrase, I would say. That because a lot of times people get into this cycle where certain words, certain phrases in their brain, because it's been repetitive, like they automatically assume that they're going to be going back to that same fight, that same, you're driving on the wrong side of the road, you're driving too fast, and you think that that moment that I call here we go again, right? That
Mm.
every single phrase. And so coming up with that safe phrase, right, I think becomes very handy, right? What you just mentioned, that there's a phrase that she came up with. Obviously, you were okay with it. That it didn't feel like here we go again. It just felt like the safe phrase of, hey, can you pay closer attention to what we're doing?
See, and this phrase was a phrase that I came up with,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I defined what I wanted to do differently, and I
Right.
had a message for myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I shared this message with her,
Yep.
right? So I took on 100% responsibility because I actually could now empathize,
Yep.
right? That empathy came after I
Mm-hmm.
realized, okay, she's done. There's
Yep.
like we've hit rock bottom here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important for people to be clear. Like this is the boundary.
Yep.
If we're going any further, there's got to be change,
Yep.
right? Because if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have stopped long enough to be okay. Really, it
Yep.
really impacted you seriously that
Mm-hmm.
way.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's important to have a statement for yourself, and part of the opportunity is there's a sequence of events.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to wait till the point of no return in the sequence of events to
Right.
make change.
Mm-hmm.
I want to backtrack it as far as I can,
Absolutely.
right? So that I can make change earlier on
Mm-hmm.
in that series of events. And
Yep.
that's where you want most of those statements to happen. Yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
can have a pull cord, right?
Yep.
That this is my last you're crossing the line. Yes, I do think that's important in particular relationships. But when we take on 100% responsibility for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
it's wise to kind of look at the sequence of events and map it
Mm-hmm.
out. Get some help to
Mm-hmm.
do this,
Yep.
right? And map it out and say, okay, this is step one, this is step two. Okay, this is where um, it's best for me to climb back down this ladder
Yep.
because once I start going up there, right? It's
Right.
very hard to slow it down.
What about the opposite end? What about the person who's receiving the apology? Let's say that the person is doing all these actionable steps. They're in therapy. They're holding themselves accountable. They have a supportive community, and doing everything right, so to speak, by the book. And then you have someone on the opposite end that is, for lack of a better word, using this as a power tool, as a power tactic of not good enough. Like nothing you do, doesn't matter what, it's just not good enough. The apology, whether it be because they really are actually in pain, or they see this as an opportunity to kind of play puppet master. Is that something
Mm.
that you see, or what does that look like?
Well, I don't see it very often, to be honest with you, where people are intentionally evil.
Hmm. Yep.
Maybe that's partly because of how I
I
get
think
to
I
know
think I
people.
think maybe we need to switch caseloads.
No thanks. No thanks. No thanks. You can keep it. But what I do know for a fact is so many people have gone through so much hurt and pain that's been unaddressed that this becomes their default and they don't even know when they're doing it,
Right.
right? So it's important if you are in a position where you've been hurt with someone that you are on your journey of healing
Hmm.
too,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
So now, again, so back to the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation.
Hmm.
Forgiveness is for you,
Hmm.
okay? Primarily, you can offer it to someone, you can give it as a gift to someone.
Hmm.
But when you go through a forgiveness process, because forgiveness is both a choice and a journey,
Right.
okay? It's a choice and a journey. Just because you forgive someone does not mean that you are reconciled with them or
Hmm.
that you have to reconcile with them.
Right.
Forgiveness does not mean I say I think your behavior was okay.
Hmm.
Forgiveness is I see what you did and I see how it impacted me.
Yep.
Now I also see who you are, where you are in your journey.
Hmm.
So I'm going to give you an opportunity to take care of you while I take care of me.
Yeah.
Okay. And perhaps we can keep going down this road, but let's see what you're going to do about it, right?
Yeah.
So I think healing enables you to make an informed choice.
Hmm.
So if you choose not to forgive,
Hmm.
okay, that's your choice. But why stay?
Hmm.
If you're not ready to forgive,
Yeah.
why stay?
Right.
Right? So I think it's important to look at yourself and you are responsible for your own healing.
Because I think that's what you said is that's important to acknowledge that it's okay to acknowledge and say to yourself that I can't get over this, right? This is not something I can get past, right? We don't have, I mean, we can forgive and also not realize that this just isn't something that I'm willing to put up with. I mean, I'm thinking of people who, some people can. I'm just going to use infidelity as an example. Some people can work through it. Some people are like, I just can't. I forgive this person. I can't move past it. Right. I just don't feel like I can trust this person anymore because of certain circumstances. And so it's okay to acknowledge that. For me, this is over.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And you know me, Matt, I
Yeah.
think a lot about words. So
Yep.
I never, I stay away from saying I can't get over this,
Right.
saying something like, you know what? I'm choosing.
Yeah.
I'm choosing to move in a different direction,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Hmm.
Right? And you can say, I don't trust you.
Yeah,
Credibility is gone.
yeah,
I
yeah,
choose to do something different.
yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because that's very empowering. It's a very empowering statement that I choose to.
That's right. Because
That I,
100%, if
I'm
you
not
say, I
stuck.
can't get over this,
Right,
when you leave that relationship, you're still saying, I can't get over this. That means
right,
you're stuck. You're
right.
stuck beneath it, you're stuck behind it. And who wants that?
Yeah, absolutely. What about the opposite end? As much as we encourage apologies, what about over apologizing?
Oh. Okay, well, there are many angles we could come
Yeah.
from with this. So, one instance of over apologizing could be conditioned, right? If
Mhm.
you've been the scapegoat or you've been somebody who's, always looking for approval, then you may attempt to address things and apologize, force of habit,
Yeah.
right? Um, and you may apologize when you're not responsible,
Yeah.
which is one of the worst things that somebody could
Mhm.
do.
Mhm.
It's not good for you,
Mhm.
right, to take over responsibility,
Mhm.
nor is it good for the other person
Right.
because it doesn't give them the opportunity to take
Right.
responsibility, right? And then there's the reality that sometimes people can't forgive themselves,
Yeah.
or shouldn't say can't, they don't know how to,
Right.
right? So they get
Mhm.
stuck apologizing again and again. The other person's moved on.
Yeah.
They're like, why are you still bringing it up? Like,
Yeah.
right? So you choose to forgive, whether it's yourself or somebody else, and then you go through the process. It is a
Right.
process.
Right. Yeah, I think you've mentioned that a couple times that it's process and that it. I always compare it to like an iceberg that it takes time, right? A lot of times people think that you can just have this conversation and we're done, but it really is a journey and a healing process to go through. To especially if it
100%.
was especially if it's something significant and you're choosing to try to repair the relationship, like you have to feel it, you have to actually experience the pain, you actually have to experience your actual feelings to actually get
Right.
through it, because
Right.
we can't just deny and just act like these experiences didn't happen and act like the emotions aren't there. They're real, and for you to actually get through it, you have to feel it, you have to feel it to heal it, as they always say.
100%. Because when we don't feel it,
Hmm.
right, that means we haven't fully addressed it.
Right.
Right. So your level of forgiveness, as well as the level of apology,
Yep.
is only going to go as deep and as far as your understanding of the impact.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's like a wound, right?
Hmm.
You get wounded, right?
Yeah.
You could put a bandage on it,
Hmm.
but what if there's dirt in it,
Right.
right? What if
If
there's
it gets
bone
infected,
broken under
yeah.
there?
Hmm.
And you don't know. You just
Hmm.
bind it up and then move on. No, that's not how it works. That's how you get an
Yeah.
infection.
Hmm.
That's how you end up losing the arm,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
You got to take that off, go to who you need to go to, say,
Hmm.
can you take a look at this for me?
Right.
Right? Clean it out,
Right.
address it, get the stitches, bind it up. Because it's not just the passing of time that brings about healing,
Yeah.
it's what you do in that time,
Exactly.
right?
Hmm.
It's what you do, what you say to yourself, right?
Right.
How are you building up yourself in
Hmm.
here? And how are you, negotiating and navigating life differently out here? It is
Right.
definitely a process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, Coach Drew, we are running close on time. Just wanted to give you, first of all, I wanted to thank you for being a part, but also wanted to give you an opportunity to give any closing statements and tell us about your website, tell us a little bit more about your book, and how people can talk to you and get your coaching, get your services if they'd like, and also about that lovely book, because obviously all of these concepts are in that book as well.
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, The Art of a Genuine Apology, it's online. You can find it on Amazon. You can visit me at my site, coachdrew.ca. Info at coachdrew.ca is my email address. Um, yeah, I'm doing it. I love helping people. I love seeing people grow.
Yeah,
You know, when you place yourself in a supportive environment and you get coupled with that good intentions, you get good information,
absolutely.
and you have the support for consistent application,
Hmm.
the sky's the limit. So,
Absolutely.
thanks for having me. I always love talking to you,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you very much for joining, and we will talk soon.
All right.